Welcome, everyone. I'm here to call the December 14th Planning Board meeting to order. So, first off, I wanted to welcome our new member, Zhenya. Thank you for
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you for volunteering and donating your time, and we look forward to your contributions.
Thank you.
And not having the stress of having all three of us to always have to be here. So thank you. That's all you can do. All right, so roll call then would be up first. So Zhenya?
Yes.
You just have to say present or here. Melinda?
Yes.
Tamara?
Present.
And I'm Dan Cobb, also present. So we are all here. Second up is minutes approval. This would be approval of the October 16th minutes. We did not hold a November meeting. So did anyone have any comments or corrections to the October 16th minutes?
Mr. Chair, I did.
Okay, go for it.
There was there was a bit of an inconsistency in the minute. There was one statement that said that all were in favor of a wider road, but then we in fact ended up with the more narrow road, and I remember I specifically opposed the wider
Sorry,
road.
I was looking at your,
I just handwrote those notes.
but
Where?
what part of the
The minutes.
minutes? That's what I
Oh,
was, sorry, I was,
Let me see, hold on. Here on page
3.
There's the minutes. I needed to edit the exact text of it. Wrote it on the agenda thinking I was being helpful, and I didn't help in the right place. Where are the minutes? Minutes. Roll call, business, team business. Oh, thank you. Oh, they're probably
so it
right.
must have been Stillwater Pines?
Yes, it
Because that's the one
was.
we were talking about, the road,
Yes,
so that's at the end.
that's right. Does that sound consistent to the board as well? Because we did, in fact, the final decision was that the road would be the narrow road, but then there was some language that said it was, we had.
Yeah, it's at the top of.
Oh, yeah, it's right at the top.
Third to last page.
Yes, so we're.
So-
Okay, so you're saying you were opposed to the increased.
Correct.
Well-
Yes, it said, but then,
Can
but,
you, where do you point? I just want to find.
right here. So this language is correct.
Well, so there was a point in the meeting where we were all on board with the wider road, and then there was some further discussion. I think that's why it reads, the board agreed to go back to 18.2 and 2 feet for the road.
Okay.
Because there was, my recollection is there was some, or at least I was in favor, I remember, of the wider road, and that's what the applicant wanted to do.
Right.
And then there was some further discussion after Dan chimed in on the CZA and the intent, and the applicant was in this sort of, he couldn't move forward because he didn't have the permits, and he couldn't get he couldn't do the work without the permits, and he couldn't get the permits because of the road width. And then we had that protracted discussion, and Dan relayed the intent of, some of the intent of the council, and then we all landed back, including the applicant being happy with the narrower road.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, maybe I was like, I can live with a bigger road, and then, but I just remember being
Yeah.
happy that we have a narrow road, so maybe that was just my misremembering, but the bottom line is, the road will be the narrow road,
Mhm.
and that is accurate, so that's the thing that matters the most, and the minutes and the video will say what they say.
Yeah,
Cool, all
Okay, so we
right, in that case, I
don't-
think we could leave it the same,
okay.
all right.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Anything else, Tamara? I didn't have anything, so I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Second,
I second.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
That's 4-0, so that's approved. Okay, information exchange. a few items in the memo. So first up, we had the welcome to Genya, so we grabbed that. Kristen, it looked like you had a few items you wanted to update us on.
Sure. So just as a heads up, the self-storage facility development moratorium is now lifted. So those new ordinance standards that were before you for the public hearings and went before council and all that, they are now in effect. They were approved and the timeline is passed, so those are in effect. So if you see another self-storage development before you, there'll be a whole other set of standards that would be applied. The LD 2003 amendments regarding the accessory dwelling units, the density and affordability are also now in effect. Those are the ones that also came before you as of November 16. And there's ongoing work for amendments to the residential open space subdivision part of the ordinance to also bring that into compliance, which is a bit more complex. Not sure if that's gonna hit the January 1 deadline or not, but it's underway. And we had a staff review committee meeting on October 26th. That was for Department of Inland and Fishery and Wildlife out at the game park, the wildlife park. They had a plan approved back in 2020 to update their gift shop and admin building, and then everything kind of fell apart with the pandemic and nobody could go and their plans got delayed. So they came back looking to have that effectively revisited, reapproved, same plan with some very minor amendments to make the building a little simpler. We do have another staff review committee coming up December 18 for a proposed modular home sales facility on 45 Portland Road, the current Allstate office. So that's coming up on December 18 to review that minor change of use site plan amendment. And what's the other piece? I think I had mentioned to you folks at the site walk that we were talking about potentially doing a workshop with the Open Space Committee to talk about some of those changes going on with the residential open space subdivision ordinance and their role in working with you on providing input to that and all of that. So I did speak with them last night at their meeting, and it sounds like there's some availability or openness to maybe doing a workshop before your January 11 meeting, if that works for you guys. We can have some back and forth on that via email, but just as a heads up,
Okay.
they are on board. And what else? We already did the site walk, so that was, we have input from that site walk for the Erie Estates Eagles Ridge amendment that you were all there for, so.
Yep.
Don't need to update anyone.
Okay. Great, thank you. Anybody else have any information to exchange? Okay, me either, so we can continue to move on. So next up is new business. And our first item is Morgan Meadow Drive Subdivision. This is a sketch plan review. A request by 519 Morgan Meadows LLC, represented by Caleb Eulitt. I hope I got that right. For planning board sketch plan review of a proposal to create 2 or more lots on his 25.45 plus or minus acre property at the end of Morgan Meadow Drive off Totten Road at tax map 57, lot 23-81 in the rural residential and agricultural zoning district. This proposal is subject to subdivision review. Would you like to step up to the podium and introduce us to what you're thinking about doing? Yep.
All right, first,
Welcome. Yeah, so I think there's a sheet there for you to sign in at, and then you can just introduce yourself and tell us about what you're thinking about doing and what input you'd like from us.
All right, according to the memo here, there's 3 potential scenarios, and since submitting, and actually as of just this week, the latter 2 have been taken off the table. So to simplify things, ultimately just looking to build the 2 duplexes, so adding the 4 new dwelling units and ultimately creating only 3 lots on the property. That would keep the number of dwelling units at the 10 for the town private road specs, and not having to upgrade the private road.
Just so we're all looking at the same thing, so that means you're referring to proposed plan number 1?
Correct.
Is the one that you're looking
With a
at doing?
slight change, basically the abutter also backed out on the sale that we had agreed to.
Okay.
So lot 1 and 2 would be, the one that's listed as to abutter, and then the lot 1. And then the remaining land would be the third lot. I think there was a larger, topo map also in the files. If you looked at that, that would depict the 3, ultimate building lots.
So he's saying, yeah. So, all right, just, so the only thing, I'm not quite sure I followed you. The transfer to the abutter is not going to happen,
Correct.
and that's going to remain part of the larger lot?
That would be, the 2 blank lots on that topo map would be lot 1, lot 2, and then the remaining land would be the third lot.
And what would have gone to the abutter will be part of the third lot?
That would be its own lot with a duplex on it.
So there's 3 lots.
3 lots ultimately, correct.
3 lots plus.
Two building lots with a duplex. The smaller rectangle is the 200 by 400. The blank building lots on that topo map.
I guess I'm
we-
I'm not
sorry.
following what you mean by blank
Do you-
topo map.
Can you put it, do you have a pen on you or something? Am I come mark one of these up?
We might have a different, I thought that you
This
had,
is what we have. I don't think we have that plate on. We have the 2 that you provided, there were 2 different plans. So I think
Alright.
we're working off of this guy, if you wanna mark it up.
yeah, that's fine. So basically, future lot 1 will stay as planned.
Yep.
The one labeled to abutter would be, lot 2. And future lot 2 would just be absorbed into that
Oh.
overall
That along with lot
Oh.
3?
lot 3. Yeah. That way I don't have to extend the private road any further.
That makes sense. Do you guys wanna pass
Yes.
this on?
No, I get it.
Sorry about that, I thought
That's fine.
this was part of the submittal.
Or it didn't become part of the package.
Okay, so we're all straight? Future
Sorry about
lot
that.
1 is 1 lot. What was going to the abutter would be lot 2, and then the one that reads future lot 2 is part of the larger one in the back. Got it. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. Okay. So that simplifies a lot of feedback that you might have been requesting, and that I wasn't sure about giving as far as our preference and things like that, because that's more up to you to decide. It looks like you already decided.
Yeah, I put the sketch plan review into works before I actually had all of the pieces to the puzzle figured out, because
Okay.
just how everything worked out time-wise, but now I have that information, so.
Okay, so there's no need to talk about requested waivers. So
I
Chris,
mean, that would, sorry, you just mentioned the requested waiver for the 11th unit. That may be a potential down the road where I have the plan for the garage on that third lot. Kristen had mentioned there was no accessory dwelling that could be on its own lot.
Accessory building.
Sorry, yeah, accessory
accessory.
building. So that would be a potential, and if that can't happen, then it would ultimately only be 2 building lots. The garage would just be part of the duplex lot, as I plan to maintain ownership of all of them, so.
okay, so, I mean, as far as requesting waivers, typically, we would ask you to start from a place of, like, justifying why you need it, as opposed to us just sort of granting a waiver out of the gate.
Okay.
Just from the standpoint of, our job is to sort of judge whether something meets the ordinances, so we really need to start there. We don't create the ordinances, so we can't really say, well, that seems okay, or that's fine with us. We have to start with what the town and the town council have already created as ordinance. But we do have the ability to grant waivers, but what we ask is that, you know, you give us some reasoning for why it's required. So I think
Okay.
I would ask that you kind of start there. If you think you're going to look for a waiver, you know, write your justification and sell us on why it's required. Does that make sense on that one?
Yes,
Okay,
moving forward, yep.
all right. So let's see, comments from staff. Have you had a chance to read the memo that was provided to us?
Provided to you.
So the planner's memo dated December 4th.
Is that what Kristen sent?
That came from Kristen. Yeah.
Then yes.
Okay, yeah, so there were, let's see, 1, 2, 3 comments that she had. And I just need to read through because I'm not sure they're all applicable now that we're narrowed down to what he's intending to do.
He mentioned number 1, like an accessory building needs to be on the same lot as
Right.
principal use. So we got that down. I think, the only thing I'm unclear about, you're talking about a duplex on lot 1, a duplex on the former abutter lot, that's 4. So that brings you, there's already 6 dwelling units, so that brings you to 10.
Correct.
So your question right now is that the remaining lot, the big lot, would be, you would be asking for a waiver if you decide to pursue putting a house on there?
Yes.
Yep, okay.
Okay, so yeah, so if it's not part of the current application, then we wouldn't,
Is it though?
well, I guess, I don't know.
Yes?
Yeah, I guess, so that's something you're gonna have to decide, because it says future equipment garage, so does that mean, you know?
Yeah, that's planned for now.
Okay,
Yes, the garage and everything is definitely planned for that, on that third lot, correct.
okay, so,
And the staff comment said that you couldn't put a garage without a primary.
That's what, okay,
Which
that's
is
my
where,
feelings then.
yeah, which is where that potential request for waiver would come in.
Well, no, he's killing that line, but he's not developing.
he's not developing
So
it.
that's, he's developing
He's-
there and
he's-
he's developing here.
Okay, so there's 4 here,
Yeah.
Right,
and then if you wanna do another single family or duplex with the garage, you're gonna come back?
Sure.
Okay. We can talk offline too.
Yeah, that's, we
I
can do
just-
that.
yeah, it sounds like
Like,
there's still a little bit of details that need to be worked out before we dig into it here at planning board,
If it's a change, yeah, I think
because it's gonna,
he was, part of this meeting was looking for that initial feedback, I think, about the potential road waiver, like how you guys feel about 1 dwelling unit
Yeah.
over. The threshold's 10. If he takes it to 11, if you had any thoughts on that to share with him
So-
early.
okay, okay.
I know you already spoke to.
Well, we can,
Stuff.
I guess we can share some thoughts. I mean, I can start, which is that I'm not generally inclined to grant waivers, like there's gotta be a kind of a good reason, and the problem we can run into by just saying, well, it's only 1, then everyone that comes after you says, well, you did it last time, and it's not 10, it's 11, and then it becomes 11 and 12, and you know, where do you stop? It's sort of a slippery slope with, you know, we need a good justification here for why we waive something, like that it's not required, you know, because something that's unique about the site or the application, you know, that there needs to be something that makes it sort of a special circumstance, not like just generally, well, 11's okay because it's close to 10. Because then that has the effect of the planning board amending the ordinance. So that's our challenge, and I know maybe it sounds like, well, it's only 1 more, but we, you know, that's why I sort of asked for the justification and what's unique about the site or the property or why it has to be that way. So for me, a waiver would be my initial take is it would be a tough sell, but without knowing the specifics, like I don't wanna, you know, can't really just say no now, but I guess for me personally, it would be a tough sell, and I'll let each of the other board members speak to it as well, and you can take it for what it is, because we won't take a vote on it. So, anyone have anything? He's looking for feedback on this so he can help shape his proposal, so.
Just, Mr. Chairman, my
Yeah.
one thought is especially if, the lot that now is gonna be on a mostly wet piece, you still wanna build a duplex there. If you made that a single family, then you would be able to have another residential on this large lot and have a duplex on your second one, and you wouldn't have to make your road any longer, so you'd be at the 10 at that level. So given that, you know, it seems like a development of this property is pretty reasonable to do without making your road a lot longer and, you know, without requiring a waiver, that's where we sort of say like, okay, the starting point is compliance, and then, you know, compliance is hard, and this is an extra cost, and this is why the design isn't good, and then that it allows us to be more open, but it seems like 10 seems pretty easy to achieve and to develop in a reasonable fashion, so just second the chair's thoughts on that. That's
Okay.
where I'd land too.
Okay, thank you. Tamara?
Agreed.
Okay. Jenya, anything to add? Okay. So I think you've got your feedback there. I think you've got an uphill battle to, if you think you want to get a waiver there, so.
Okay.
Yep, okay. Okay, so what's number 2? So you guys will talk more offline about what the final
Yeah.
proposal will be. and-
Certainly happy to follow up with you and
Yeah.
get kind of your updated pitch, given what you hear from them tonight.
So number 2, is there anything new here that we haven't covered? I think this speaks to the 10. So I think we covered that. And then number 3. And this wouldn't apply because you're not, number 3 goes away
Correct, I'm not-
because you're not doing the open
Not
space.
pursuing that.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, so, I'll skip over the site walk piece for now and come back to that. So looking at any discussion points, I think we talked about number 1. We don't need to give any thoughts on preference, he's made a decision, more or less. Okay, any comments on this would be to the board, any comments on specific elements of this site? Any questions or comments about the site or the plan itself?
I would just echo the comment that Melinda made in regards to the wetness of that one lot. And so would definitely want to be looking at that on the sidewalk. And understand what the building envelope is going to be there.
Yep.
Ditto.
Anything, Jenya, from you at this point? Okay. And then, number 4 will not be applicable now because open space is not in the plan. Okay, yeah, I don't have any questions at this time about the site or anything. Is there any other input tonight that you would like to get from us that would help you move forward?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I can follow up with Kristen and
Yep,
tidy that up a little bit.
yeah, okay. So my initial thought on this when I was reading the documents ahead of time was that I was gonna suggest we hold off on the site walk until we knew which direction things were going, because they were so different. But now that that's off the table, I guess the site walk is probably appropriate, so. I guess,
If you want one.
yeah, so that was my first question. We don't have to have a site walk. We have to consider one. So if people are comfortable with the plan as it is and don't feel like there's much they need to see, we don't need to do one, so. Would the board like to have one? That's the first question.
I think I'm very curious about how you can build on that very wet-looking lot, so the building envelope would be useful, but given weather conditions, I'm not sure what we would really learn,
Yeah.
tromping out there, because maybe there's not snow now, but by the time we schedule something, there could be, and it might not be that useful. And the wetlands are shown on a plan, so that might be the best way to really sort that out, and the other lots are less of an issue, so I'd be open to not doing a site walk, because I'm not sure how much more information we could get given weather and stuff, so.
Yeah, that was my thought. I was hoping someone would propose that. To me, I would agree that, you know, if you delineate the building envelope on the plan and show that it's buildable, I think that should be fine. It's pretty routine otherwise with just a couple lots.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to go on a site walk if the board thinks we need one. So, Shenya?
Well, it's pretty easy to. I don't think we need it.
Okay. Tamara?
Good with the building envelope on the.
Okay, so we'll pass on the site walk and just ask you to delineate that building envelope on the plan when you come back.
Definitely.
Yeah. And this one's not a public hearing, so,
It's just sketch.
yeah, so, I think we can skip that unless there's someone that's dying to comment. I guess I could allow it.
So we can follow up.
Don't see anyone. Okay, so you're off and running. Check in with Kristen, finalize your plan and your idea around what you're doing with the garage and what you can ask for, and we'll see you when you're ready to come back.
Okay.
Great,
Good.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Next up is Mayall Road, Gervais Subdivision, sketch plan review. This is a request by Andrew Gervais of Gervais Homes LLC, represented by Austin Fagan of BH2M Engineering for planning board sketch plan review of a proposal to create a 12-lot subdivision on his 60 plus or minus acre property near 279 Mayall Road at tax map 21, lot 26-20 in the rural, residential, and agricultural and business development 1 zoning districts. This proposal is subject to major subdivision review.
Good evening.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Austin Fagan, with BH2M, representing the applicant Andy Gervais. So to give you a little heads up on the project, Andy's proposing a 12-lot residential subdivision off Mayall Road, just south of Route 202 in the rural residential and agricultural zone, and a portion of the site is also in the business development 1 district. The parcel to be developed is currently is a tree growth parcel, and it will be withdrawn from that program prior to a formal submission of a preliminary application to the board. The proposed development will consist of 6 conventional 80,000 square foot lots with frontage on Mayall Road. And the additional 6 lots are going to be proposed off of an internal roadway, approximately 1,000 feet long. All lots within the subdivision will be served by private wells and septic systems. As you can see on the sketch plan that we provided, wetlands have been delineated by Mark Hampton Associates. Mark Hampton has also delineated the soils on site prior to getting our density for the sketch plan. All of the wetlands on site are poorly drained soils. Everything else in the upland portions are anywhere from somewhat poorly drained to moderately well drained. We don't believe there will be any problems getting individual septic systems on each site, but we will provide septic test pits as part of the formal application. Kristen so kindly provided us with a memo that I'm sure you all have up front of you right now. To cover a few of the things before we get into discussion, there is a stream shown on the property that bisects lots 3 and 4. It's my interpretation right now that this is an intermittent stream. So more or less when we get larger storm events, it's for draining water out of the property. That being said, I will verify that. Either way, I do believe there will be at least a 75-foot setback from a stream channel. So that most likely will not change in terms of the dimensional requirements off of it. So as you can see on the plan, we don't show a formal open space area. It's shown more or less as open space and remaining land at this time. We understand that we will need to give you a more or less meets and bounds of formal open space that will be provided. That will be, I believe, either retained by an association or by the applicant until further time. So since there is a precedence, it looks like, for shared driveways for lots that are created on an existing roadway, the only question that I have on that is, Kristen had stated in the memo that a driveway or a shared driveway can serve up to 2 units. There'll be named driveways, but I just want to verify, maybe a staff question, whether there'll be a structure setback off of, whether it's an easement or a right-of-way that's provided for a shared driveway, since technically it's not a roadway.
Did you want to speak to that,
Sure.
Kristen?
I can double check it. It wouldn't be, my understanding is that your frontage would still be off of Mayall.
Yep.
So that would be like at least a side setback, but I can double check if there's a driveway setback in
Okay.
or not. It's not jumping out in my brain.
Good
I will
enough.
look into it for you.
Thank you. The last major question that I have in terms of design prior to moving into a formal design always comes with stormwater. So with this site, as you can see, the proposed roadway runs along what is more or less a ridge line between wetlands. So these proposed building lots are a good example of where you would use low impact development techniques for stormwater, such as stormwater buffers or level spreaders, in order to get stormwater into sheet flow prior to getting back into the stormwater infrastructure along Mayall Road. The proposed roadway, that's something where we can catch all of the concentrated flows in a ditch system and put it into some sort of a structural BMP in order to slow down the water. But the lots with frontage on Mayall Road and the lots that drain directly into wetlands may create a condition where you get an increased peak flow rate from the site. So I'm wondering if the board or if staff has some sort of recommendation on if minor increases in stormwater would be allowed, as long as the downstream infrastructure can handle it. In reading the ordinance, I did find that in section, which I believe this applies, 401.7.3, there is a condition where we're not necessarily looking for a waiver of an analysis of the stormwater, but it says the board may waive submissions of stormwater management plans only if the subdivision is not in the watershed of a great pond, and upon finding that the proposed subdivision will not involve road construction or grading which changes the pattern, and if the addition of the impervious area, such as roofs and driveways, is less than 5% of the present area of the subdivision. In this case, we have 60 acres, so 5% of that would be about 3 acres of impervious area. Even if we allocated, up to, like, say, 5,000 square feet of impervious per lot and a 1,000-foot roadway, we would still be well under that threshold. So more or less just looking to see how we should plan on mitigating stormwater impacts for this project. And other than that, if the board has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Maybe while your question is fresh in our minds, we can touch on that. I'll start with Kristen, whether there's any staff feedback for him on that.
Given that they're proposing several lots in a residential open space subdivision and several lots on a pretty significant road in town, I think you'd probably want a stormwater management plan.
Yeah,
I don't know that I would support it as staff to waive that in its entirety.
right.
The considering some sort of waiver for how the stormwater plan shakes out.
Yep.
Would be something that you could discuss. That would
Yeah.
be, could come before the board if there's some way that you find in your design that you're not able to meet the ordinance. I don't know if you've touched on that yet. I think, and I'm not an engineer, I'd want, you folks to submit what you have for stormwater management to our consulting engineer, and
Right.
then the board would have his feedback, and he would be able to speak to that a lot more intelligently than I can, so that would be my suggestion.
Yeah,
Have
and
something.
that was essentially my feedback on your question about, what the board's preference there would be, is that you would submit something, work with the town's consulting engineer, and then, the board, obviously, like folks like the fire chief and our consulting engineer, we lean heavily on their feedback because we're not necessarily experts in any or all of those areas. So we'd be sort of out of place, making some recommendations along those lines without peer review buying into it first.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So I did, just before we get into any questions, I wanted to kind of walk back to the staff comments. I was following through with your comments, and you talked to a few of the staff comments, but not all of them, so, which is fine. I just wanted to make sure that you had the chance to acknowledge that you saw the three staff comments in the first section, and then the four additional regarding the residential open space, and then the one other one regarding the traditional. I know you spoke to some, but not all, but, in general, this would be your time to ask the planner or the board, if there's anything that you're not, either you don't understand or you don't agree with. Now is a good time to raise that. Otherwise, we're going to assume that you're going to include it in your submission.
Absolutely. So if you want me to walk through them, that's a good way to cover this, I think.
Yep.
So the first staff comment pertaining to several additional submittal items that are necessary, such as showing well and septic locations for each lot, building envelopes, driveways as well. That's not a big deal. Each lot is around 40,000 square feet, so there should be plenty of room for both septic system and a well, but it's always good to verify that with a good set of plans. So we have no problem putting that on set. In terms of the NERPA stream, once again, I'm not necessarily sure on those details yet, but it's something that I will cover with the wetland delineator. Class B high-intensity soils was submitted, and it appears that, lots 6 and 8 do have some steep slopes on it, so if we need to show some grading on the sites, how a house would be set, that, typical elevations for a foundation would work on that site, we're happy to do so. Let's see. Showing site distance on the new road, as well as a plan profile. That is standard procedure for us, so we'll get that submitted with the preliminary design. Residential open space subdivision, we'll need to add buffering. We understand that. That's something that Kristen did bring up to me right when we submitted the sketch plan application, so that's something we are prepared for. Next question pertaining to delineating more or less a set in stone open space area. We will add that to the plans. Let's see. Access to open space, that's also something that we'll address. We need to have at least a 60,000 square foot area in order to access open space for everybody. So that'll be part of the next submission. I believe it is Andy's intention to build the road to a rural public easement street standard. As you saw in your packet, we did provide a potential full build out of the project that would have some additional development in the future. This is a may or may not happen situation, but we just wanted to show what could be inevitably. So that being said, in the what if situation, I believe it'll be built to the higher standard. So the shared driveways, we discussed that. Shared driveways again, we're good with that. So then going through the recommendations discussion. Does the board agree?
Yeah, well, I'll take that.
Okay,
Yeah,
sounds
that's
good to
fine.
me.
I wanted to make sure you were good with everything, that, you know, this is your chance to push back on anything, or otherwise we'll expect to see it next time. So, yep,
Sounds
thank
good.
you
Thank you.
for walking through that. So, okay. Any initial questions from the board for the applicant?
Well, about the stream and about the stormwater management, like, usually BMP's, like, best management practice is retention pond with the cattails. So actually, a lot of that water will be collected and then evaporated instead of going into the wetlands. Just a comment.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Nothing, yeah,
Just definitely looking forward to the staff giving, complying with what the staff asks. I
Mhm.
mean, that's important.
Yeah. okay. I'm gonna skip over the site walk again for now. We can cover that in a bit. So, a few discussion points recommended by staff. So, first one was, do we agree with the suggestion to require applicant to show well septic locations for each lot, building envelope driveways to aid in review of lot viability? Guessing that's a yes. It's a yes for me, so, yeah. Jenya, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's a yes. Number two, does the board have comment on the open space location, quality, and road access and potential siting? So I'll start with that to say, what I would request is that you review the ordinance regarding open space and chat with Kristen on this when you're talking with her, because we often get proposals that come in and they've already got an idea of what they want to do with open space.
Yep.
And I've found that, more often than not, they don't meet the requirements in the ordinance for one reason or another. It makes probably good engineering sense, which is why the engineer did it. But there's typically been, some basic elements that have been missing. So rather than you starting that way, my suggestion would be talk with Kristen and make sure you understand what all those elements are. And as Melinda had mentioned earlier in a previous application, what we're looking for is start from a place of compliance. And if you want to do something creative or different, that you're looking for a waiver, bring a justification along with that, why compliance isn't achievable, or why what you want to do is better for some reason. And we do have some latitude to grant waivers there.
Sounds great.
I don't know if anyone, I wasn't ready to make any recommendations on open space at this time. I more wanted to see what they were going to suggest first.
I agree.
So I saw lots of nodding heads there. So we'll let you do your design work and then give you feedback on it. Number three, staff suggestion to encourage applicant to build the internal subdivision road to rural public easement street standards in anticipation of phase 2. Anyone?
I think the applicant said that was the
Yeah.
plan, right?
Yes.
Right, that's what I,
Like that.
yeah.
And again, that's totally up to that. It's more
Yeah.
of to help you
mean-
out sort of thing, right? Rather than when you get to phase 2, having to rebuild your whole road.
Right, I mean, it would make sense to me, so
Yeah, just a
it's not that we can require it, but would make good business sense if that's your plan.
Yep.
Okay, and then number 4, staff recommendation of requiring shared driveways rather than individual driveways for the traditional subdivision. Anybody have any comments on that one?
That seems to make a lot of sense. Plus, it just helps with stormwater management because it's less impervious, so.
Jenya?
Yeah, I agree on that.
Same.
Yeah, so I've got,
But do we,
oh, go ahead.
do we actually have anything say in the ordinance, like, which says like that, the shared driveway is like allowed in general? Or it's common practice nowadays?
So I'll let Kristen speak to that, I think.
It is allowed to serve up to 2 dwelling units off of a single driveway. So if these were like both duplexes, that wouldn't work, but it can serve up to 2 single families. And it is required for some major collector roads.
Okay.
And we felt that in this instance, Mayall is also a fairly significant road, and it might be something that would be a good approach here to minimize the number of turning movements. And so
Okay, thank you.
before you that way.
Yep.
They've worked with
Good-
us on
good
that
question.
plan, so.
And I'll just give my comment, which is I've got no reason to not go along with the staff recommendation, so it looks like you might have had something to add, Linda?
This road is just very near my house and I use it all the time, and even though it's a surprisingly busy road, and reducing the number of driveway entrances seems like it would be good for this road. There's a
Mhm.
lot of trucks that use it, and the trucks, yeah.
Okay.
Thank
For
you.
Mordor.
Okay, so, and then returning back to the site walk, so the thing that I was thinking about on this one is that it would be nice if the open space were defined first before we went out to look at the site. So I'm not sure it makes sense to set a site walk now, because we would go out there and see the site, but not necessarily have in our mind what's being proposed. Food for thought.
I agree.
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like we'll defer setting the site walk until, I mean, to me, that's maybe the one missing piece, because you don't really know what you're planning yet. So I think just given our past history with applications and site walks and open space, they're always a big topic, and when we're walking around, it's a lot easier if we have something firm to be, discussing.
Now, in terms of this lot, it is a fully wooded lot, so open space is more or less all going to be very similar, I guess it would depend on if it's a flat area or a sloping area. My major concern with this one would be, location of the roadway, location of, what the frontage along Mayall Road looks like for driveways. Is that something that the board would be concerned about prior to a preliminary design, or something that we could take care of after preliminary?
Like with respect to like site distance and things like that, or?
Not site distance, just, surrounding areas, I know abutters typically have concerns on locations of new roadways and things like that, so we just wanna make sure that before we do a formal design, that everybody's okay with
Oh, I see.
locations.
Yeah, I mean, typical things that might come up are like, if you're looking to add an intersection directly across from someone's house, we're gonna be asking about buffering and things like that, to buffer headlights and,
Okay,
typical things that you might expect.
okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
Do you have anything?
we can't obviously speak to abutter concerns ahead of time, but
Yeah.
we can walk through some of that initially at a staff level. My question, point of clarification, do you want to wait until they come back formally before the board with their plan to schedule the site walk? Or if they come back with open space delineated at some point before your January meeting, is there interest in scheduling at that point? Do you want to see it again first?
I think for me, it wasn't that they formally come back, but that we know what we're talking about and
Okay.
looking at,
So as soon as they have something that you can walk around with?
we could schedule it offline.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everyone would be fine with that, right? I mean, does everyone agree with that idea?
I just want to support Kristen in that, when it gets set now, then you don't have extra notices that need to be made, so I'm just wondering if.
Well, it would still
Yeah.
have to have the notice, like if we set it in the future by email, it would still have to be X days out.
Right, if we, what
Oh,
Tom
yeah,
said,
I know,
when we're
sorry, I
setting
know
it,
what you're
we'd like to
saying, if
do
we,
like the
yeah,
press herald
yeah,
notice.
yeah,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, which that's an expense issue, I don't mind doing it, but it's an expense issue, that's why we try to do it, but I understand what you're saying, you don't feel it's ready yet, so that's fine too. We try to do that out of convenience and an effort to save money for the town when we can,
Right.
but a butter,
Right.
notices always have to go out and
Yeah.
always push us out a couple weeks anyway, so.
I mean, my preference would be to know that we've got something to look at.
Yep.
So I think we'll wait until you've got a little bit better idea around that,
Okay.
then we'll schedule it. Okay, think that's it on this one then, unless, does anyone have anything else, or are you looking for any other feedback from us at this time?
I guess the only thing would be, would you like another sketch plan submission and meeting in order to set the site walk, or is it okay if we do it offline?
I think offline is fine, so if you submit, you don't need to do a full sketch plan submittal.
Okay.
You could email whatever the appropriate sheet or sheets are
Yep.
to Kristen, and then she can forward it to us and confirm that she's, that you've submitted something, and we'll work on setting a date.
Sounds great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks
Okay,
for your time.
all right,
Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Webster, I have a question for you. I know we had talked briefly about you might have had some interest in providing open space input. And what I'm thinking about here is there's some open space to talk about on this upcoming one, and we have an applicant that's about to walk out the door that is going to be designing open space. So I was going to offer to you, if you want, you don't have to, but if you, this might be a nice time, if you wanted to provide any relevant context, it would be useful to both of them before he leaves.
Okay.
Sorry to sort of confusing, but I forgot to mention it earlier, and I thought we could do two things at once here,
Sure.
but don't feel obligated.
No.
You can decline my offer.
Nope.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I'm Doug Webster. I'm in the planning department here at the town. Just a real quick backtrack with the road. If your phase 2 puts you over the 10 dwelling unit threshold, you might want to think about increasing the right-of-way width or the road base so that you will be better poised to meet the next road classification up if you exceed 10 dwelling units. You see what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
Increasing the base is cheap money when you're doing it, but you see where I'm coming from on that. Just a suggestion, I'm sorry. So the open space, the current residential open space subdivision standards, 401-1313, were drafted about 8 or 9 years ago, I guess, at this point. The standards for the perimeter buffer are quite rigid and are intended to be that way. The philosophy, the reasoning is if you are putting a relatively densely developed area in a predominantly rural area, then the abutting property should be, the goal should be to minimize the adverse impact on abutting properties, and that so is a lot of emphasis placed on particularly the front buffer and as well as the perimeter buffer, and that's why it's in there in the ordinance where it has to be fractionally owned and not an easement on an individually owned parcel. So that's one element. For planning board members that have been on the board for a while, there's a lot of times there are discussions about the quality of the common park area. And I would encourage the board to look at that language. I think the intention was to have a usable area immediately adjacent to the road, and we're actually in the process of amending that language to be more specific. But I would encourage the board to try to look at that qualitative language as well as the numerical standards in the table at the very end of the subdivision ordinance that talk about the minimum size and so forth. But it's supposed to be usable. It's not supposed to be wet. It's not supposed to be steep. It's intended to be a common gathering area for residents that live in that subdivision. So that's Those, I think, were the relevant points, and again, I would encourage the board to follow the guidance that is provided in 401-1313. So
Great,
maybe that helps.
thank you. Hopefully that was a little helpful context for the board as well as our upcoming and outgoing applicants.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Okay. Moving on. Next up is Erie Estates Amendment to Eagles Ridge Subdivision Preliminary Plan Review. This is a request by Sebago Realty LLC, represented by D.H. Roma Consulting Engineers, for preliminary review of a proposal to create a 14-lot residential open space subdivision on the 41 plus or minus acre parcel off Eagles Nest Road at tax map 63, lot 35-24, on the remaining land in the Eagles Ridge subdivision in a rural, residential, and agricultural zoning district. The proposal is subject to major subdivision plan review. Do we
Good
have an
evening.
applicant?
We do. We have an applicant and a representative for the applicant. My name is JP Conley. I work for DM Roma Consulting Engineers. And I'm here representing Sebago Realty LLC. And along with me tonight is Dustin Roma, I'm a duly authorized member of Sebago Realty, as well as president of DM Roma. So tonight we'd like to present to you a open space residential subdivision off of Eagles Nest Road, which is in South Gray, accessed from Upper Marginal Way and Route 100. The design we have in front of you is a 13-lot it's a 14-lot subdivision. It's 13 residential open space lots with a 14th back lot. The lots will be served by private septics and wells. They will be accessed from a residential subdivision road that measures about 1,100 linear feet. It is an amendment to the Eagles Eagles Ridge subdivision. And it is, even though we are not associated with them, there's no connectivity between, or nexus between the developer and the previous developer. This was a piece of remaining land from that subdivision, which was purchased, and we'd like to now develop. I think we can just more or less jump right into the memo concerns. Having a site walk and having also had some comments from the abutter, we have made some efforts to reach out to him and had some conversations. In fact, I met with him today to discuss some of the revisions to the plan that we can accommodate.
Just for everyone's benefit, because I realized I forgot to forward this to the rest of the board, but you're referring to buffering, correct?
More or less. Not so much buffering, but realignment, to be honest with you. And I met with...
Because, sorry, just to bring
feel
everyone
free.
up to speed, the concern was the headlights,
Yes.
the driveway.
So directly across from this project site is an existing residence. It's been there since the 70s.
Yeah, this was the gentleman that attended the site walk.
Ted McDonald,
Yeah.
and his wife lived there. He approached us after the site walk and asked us to consider realignment of the road, and maybe moving the road location up or south or down the road to basically not direct headlights directly at his house. And we appreciate that, and it was one of those things that we definitely have taken a serious look at, and potentially we can accommodate. And while we're on this subject, I'll just kind of go into
Sure,
that.
yeah.
What we were considering doing is a couple of things. At the access to the road, we have proposed stormwater management pond, as well as a curve to the road to make it perpendicular to Eagle's Nest. What we'd like to do now is deviate from that perpendicular connection and provide a 15-degree or less deviation from 90 degrees. So essentially angling the road, ending the curve if you're driving up our subdivision road early, and directing the road to connect further down Eagles Nest Road, which would essentially put headlights aimed more towards his garage or even below that. In addition to that, while we're on that subject, and with Mr. Webster's discussion of the open space, we are anticipating moving the pond location because for a couple of reasons. One, it's currently located within the 75-foot scenic buffer. So we'd be pulling it back out of the scenic buffer and putting it on the opposite side of the road. So what we would have in that layout, in that scenario, is the 70-foot scenic buffer, actually an open space allotment for access as well as a community area right there, and then our stormwater pond, and then lot 8. So the lot 8 would
That was
on
the
the site-
triangular one? right?
Yes,
Yep.
with the very large frontage. So that was kind of what we were looking at. I asked Kristen today if, where the staff would stand on that, the deviation. With this situation, with Eagles Nest Road being a dead-end road leading to a subdivision further up, the predominant traffic movement would be exiting the subdivision, would be turning right to go down to Route 100. So we thought that would be appropriate. Aside from that, we would be willing to propose plantings on Mr. McDonald's lot, and I won't speak for him, but he seemed to be amenable to that option as well, but with the preference of realigning the road so it didn't, go directly at his house.
Can I ask if it's feasible or possible to, it probably isn't, or you would have proposed it, but to bend the road and then bend it back so you enter at a 90-degree, or can you not get far enough from his property to do that?
The difficulty with that would be, one, in topography. If we were to, not bend the road and push it further up the hill, we would have a difficult time getting, the road steepens there as it goes up and climbs, so that provides the scenario that doesn't work out great. The other issue is we are adjacent to a potential vernal pool. We're considering it as a vernal pool, and we're staying away from it, even though we haven't determined that it really is a vernal pool at this point. We haven't done the monitoring in the spring to confirm whether or not it's viable for egg masses and things of that nature. So we're gonna treat that vernal pool as it's a vernal pool. And so getting closer that way would be difficult as well as the alignment of the road really would predicate on the depth of the lots as well. If we pushed it to the north, the depth of the lot decreases. So that's kind of where we're going with it now. I can do, we can show that more in on the plan a little bit better if you'd like to see that in more depth, but I'd like to move on to other things, and then we can come back to it if you guys
No, that's
choose. So lots 1 and lot 8 have some odd shapes, and we definitely can address those. Lot 8's shape is the triangular shape, but we just wanted that shape for more or less conservation purposes. However, we've looked at it again, and we're able to accommodate the pond, the community park area with the access to the open space, as well as that lot. So lot 1 on the other side, I posed the question to Kristen today about, specifically about that lot, in terms of, since this is a amendment to a subdivision, and the subdivision that we're amending is, we abut to the west, or abuts us to the west. We were wondering whether or not the perimeter boundary that has to be owned fractionally is actually required for that piece. And we're not certain about that, but what we were thinking is, if we could avoid having that small sliver of open space running along the back, what it would do is would allow us to make that shape of lot one more typical, more square and rectangular. So we'll await feedback from the staff as well as any comments you guys might have about that tonight. And while we recognize that the open space access needs to be within 500 feet from every lot in the subdivision, putting a community open space at the front of the property doesn't really allow that with the length of the road. So we would also consider putting one at the rear of the part, or the end of the road prior to lot 14. So we basically would have two approximately 500 feet from each lot. We thought that would be an appropriate way to solve that solution or issue. And it's more or less the same situation we would have at the front, where we would have the end of the road, the community space, stormwater pond, and we would shift the development of lot 14 that we're showing now further down to accommodate the stormwater pond. So that's kind of the way we'd like to approach that. Aside from that, as far as the town's consulting engineer comments that we've received in the planner's memo, we don't have any issues with addressing any of those. And then the comments from town staff, really, I think the only thing I'm looking for feedback and input from the board tonight on is really the open space and whether the scenario I discussed just now makes sense.
Okay.
We do have a couple waiver requests I should throw out there, but.
Yeah, let's not jump around.
Okay, sure.
So if we're on open space, I think we could provide some input there. I guess it sounds like a good idea. The only thing, I don't have it in front of me, but the thing I'm wondering about is the contiguous requirements.
Yes.
Because it's obviously, if it's in two places, it's not contiguous and,
Sure.
you know.
Well, what,
I don't know that it doesn't meet it because I don't, like I said, I don't have the wording in front of me, but
Yep.
that's what came up in my mind when you mentioned doing that.
Sure, and I can, to that, I think we could create a contiguous, open space.
Okay,
Essentially, you know, this is open space B parcel, potentially would go away if we talked about extending, you know, if we don't need to have the perimeter, fractionally owned piece. So this would be not open space, but it would still maintain a 50-foot buffer to the tree line and to the building envelope. In this scenario, you know, this is the 75-foot scenic drive buffer. We would put the, you know, the access to the open space behind that with the stormwater pond in that location, and come down here, continue this open space up to this area where we would have our second community area, pond behind it, house going further to the south. So that's kind of how we would like to address that scenario, or it's plausible way we could address it, given feedback from the board.
okay. Anybody care to start with some feedback on that?
I have a clarifying.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
So essentially, the way that you're achieving contiguous open space is the little strip of land that runs to the wooded area on lots 13 and 12, that little strip there. So the land, and actually, I guess the slopes are not super high there, but I'm just thinking in terms of like true access, the common area at the end of the road, although you know, there's land that's commonly owned that you could walk there, then you kind of come across steep slopes, wetlands, steep slopes to get to the trails, which makes access from this point at the end of the road just less realistically used because it's hard for them to get there from there.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
It would be access from the road though,
Right,
also.
that's right,
Yeah.
but I'm just thinking, and I'm just, again, this is clarifying, I'm not saying it's a problem,
Okay.
but I know that, the ordinance had required, what was it, access within 500 feet. And the nature of this parcel, this is an example where you have the nature of the parcel, it's steep, it's wet, like, you can't just walk across it any old place. And that's, you don't wanna change that, like, that's the way the land is. But from that common space, people aren't gonna realistically walk from there, they're gonna go to the end of the road to get to those trails. I mean, that's just the facts of it, right? Just clarifying.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, what, if we're talking about this one, I don't think access to that trail system is really impeded by any of the wetlands or slopes. I mean,
Yep.
as we were out on the sidewalk, I don't know if we noticed, but there were several people walking up and down the road from the subdivision
Mhm.
above. I think that's a fair way to access it, you know, and quite frankly, if I were to live in the subdivision, I think I'd walk the road and walk
Mhm.
down Eagles Nest Road or the
Yep.
shoulder and then access. But we have the ability to provide, you know, the space for a trail as well as a trail through there, you know. Our design for the trail doesn't include, like, we're not paving it, we're not,
Don't place
yeah,
it.
the only thing we're gonna be allowing is limbing of trees.
Okay.
You know, so there would be no disturbance in that area, no land disturbance formally as recognized by DEP or Army Corps. So now, the issue with the space down at this end
Mhm.
would be whether or not you would consider that access into that area
Mhm.
as viable.
Right.
Yes, you would have to come down a fairly steep slope,
Mhm.
you'd have to cross a wet area, and then, you know, come back up a hill. While it's probably not gonna be utilized a lot, it would be able to provide access and, you know, in discussions, we've kind of tried to figure out a way through there that would work and, you know, footbridge over that wouldn't be too excessively expensive, so that could be a consideration as well. You'd still have to climb down a slope and then up a slope, but as we all know, I mean, that's not too different than climbing up and down that road right now as it is.
Yeah.
With the exception, it's different surface, you
Yeah.
know. So if you were inclined to walk down there and over to there, you're essentially walking the same distance to access that trail if you wanted to not do that. So we'd provide the option, and, you know, if however people use it and utilize it, it's entirely up to them. But I think the two connections could be viable.
I would just say, I really like the idea of having common space both places, because it does make a convenient common area for everyone that's, you know, close to them and not quite so far. So I like that you've, done that, and that you've gotten the stormwater treatment out of the buffer also.
Yep.
That was required, but it was nice that you admitted that it was required, so.
Well, it sort of just kind of more or less come to light in a couple of different ways. Well, and we might talk about that later on tonight.
And I mean, we live in Maine. Many trails are hard to, you know, they're not flat, and that's fine. So, I hadn't really thought about the fact that there's that strip of land that's owned fractionally, that you wouldn't be traipsing across the neighbor's property to get back to that bigger space. And
That
was
was a
looking
big,
at the plan, trying to puzzle it through, like, do you slice the, I hadn't realized that solution, and so, so I think that, I mean, does make them all the open space contiguous. I believe that does achieve that, and that's a slick way of doing it, so. And I don't necessarily think a footbridge is critical. I'm just imagining, like, the kids are probably gonna just run around it anyways and do, I don't know. I like to leave the areas as wild as they can be, but.
yeah,
so.
we'd agree with that too. I mean, You know, previous subdivision, open space subdivision we worked on, we showed a trail, but ultimately, it's really up to whatever the HOA wants to do, once the homeowner association gets in there, what they wanna maintain, whether they use it or not, you know, that sort of thing. Obviously, we don't want disturbance in that area, we don't want them putting any community buildings or structures or anything of that nature, but, to whatever extent possible, we'd like to give them the ability to relocate trails or, you know, clear trails as they choose. We aren't really opposed to creating some as well, so that is an option. I mean, what we've shown is, on this plan, we are willing to create based on our details and specs for those trails. Yeah, I don't, you know, nobody really wants to build extra infrastructure or bridges, and like you said, you know, walking through a small area of wet would probably not be that bad. It's more the steep slopes that I think would be the bigger concern. You know, walking out on the site, we crossed some wet areas, and it wasn't, you know,
Put your boots on.
wasn't astronomical, and you know, there were some other people with us of, you know, older gentlemen with us, and they didn't seem to have too much problem walking the site either. So, you know, we're at the preliminary stage. It doesn't have to be decided this evening on what we actually, you know, improve, but, you know, any feedback on that would be great.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on the open space? No? Seems like decent direction you're working towards, so I think you can keep going in that direction.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to back up here a second. So you mentioned, as far as Mr. Haskell's comments, you're good with working through anything there?
Yeah.
Okay.
The bigger ones that come to mind, the technical ones would be the driveway grades,
Yep.
showing them that they work. We really don't have a problem with that.
Okay,
I may ask for the uphill side lots. Your requirement in the ordinance is that for a minimum of 4 to 5 feet, I believe you have to come off the road and down. While that's quite possible, it creates more of a thing where we're cutting down into the road to create a driveway and come back up. I would understand it, you know, if the concern was that water would run down the driveway and over the road and create an icing situation at each driveway. But in this scenario, I don't think that would be what would happen. Right now, we're providing roadside swales and ditches opposed to curb, where the lawn actually comes and meets the road at, you know, roughly 6 inches above the road grade, so all that water would sheet off. We intend to have the driveways, you know, crowned or pitched in one direction or another so that they don't direct water right down into the road. So that potentially might come up on certain designs, but we would present that in more detail as we would, you know, like demonstrating the grading, and everything else on the lot would be viable.
okay. Just back to just wanted to circle back to the alleged flag lot. I think we're not probably gonna give you an interpretation. Well, let's start with what you and the staff arrive at with some of your questions that you had, unless, I mean, I know I'm certainly not prepared to make any sort of assessment or weigh in on that at this point, but looks like you're not gonna get anything from us there.
Okay, well, I'd just like to say that, you know, the shape of that lot really doesn't, I wouldn't adjust the way the building layout or the clearing for that lot would happen. Frankly, when we look at subdivision design, we first look at building envelopes. We don't want to create lots that aren't buildable. So this design came with, all right, where are we gonna bring the road in? Does it create enough distance so that we can have the depth that we need for each lot? And then, so with that flag-shaped lot, it's more of just the nature of the existing property. You know, that open space B, it's been discussed, it doesn't seem all that valuable, in terms of, what can be done in it, it's just a strip of land, and, you know, the scenic buffer is in the open space to kind of protect it, but the reality is, the lot shape doesn't have anything to do, or won't influence the design, it's just the way it is based on the existing nature of the land and the property. Provided that, you know, we can work through maybe, you know, whether the interpretation of this is a perimeter, because this is the subdivision we're amending, this is, you know, we're kind of between them. This subdivision lot goes right to the property line, but they do have the buffer through it. We would like to kind of utilize the same sort of formula for those designs, just to essentially eliminate the flag shape piece on that one. So we'll wait, staff.
Yep. Okay, sounds good. I'm just gonna kind of keep walking through here. So, note from staff that the soil survey is a bit dated, perhaps. I don't think there's any issue with that for any reason.
We did
It was
provide.
intended for a more intense development at the time, and I doubt the soils have changed much since then.
Correct. Geology takes tens of thousands of years to change. So, but to your, to kind of further satisfy that, we reached out to the soil scientist, and he's provided an updated letter that states that you know, he's still content with the work he's provided, and we've got an extra copy. You know, he provided us the same report, and that was provided to the town as well.
Yep, okay, good. Open space, we talked about that. So the building, we should chat on that a little bit. We did have or at least I remained for a little conversation with you guys on the building. I thought we were all going to stick around for that, but you guys kind of hightailed out, which is fine. But we should bring everyone kind of up to speed on a thought there. So their plan is to demolish the building, and I think you were talking about basically the natural bark mulch, like trail mix or whatever, covering that over. I had made the recommendation that it should be blocked somehow with like boulders or something, so it didn't become like a parking area, since it's kind of a flat area. So that was really the extent of the conversation. I did notice Kristen picked up on one good item, which is you guys should determine if there's a well there or any other kind of hazards that need to be addressed. I have no idea, but just something to consider. I don't know if you know whether there's one there or not.
I presume there is, because there's the water, the hydrant, there is public water up there, but it doesn't extend up the hill.
Well, I was thinking more like a dug well, like something that's
Wide and
a
open, somebody
hazard.
could fall into.
Right.
Yeah, we'll investigate it.
Yeah.
If it requires additional work, we're gonna eliminate it. We don't want
Right.
it in the scenic buffer, because it would become part of our
Yeah.
scenic buffer.
So I guess the question for the board to weigh in on is, you know, is them demolishing the building and setting some trail mix or something with a requirement that it be allowed to fill in, is that satisfactory, or would you guys like to see, hang on a second, let me finish. Or would you guys like to see some replanting, since it's supposed to be you know, a visual buffer? So that would be something that we should give feedback on, and I'll let you start since you're ready to go.
Well, just one thing to mention. The house which is going to be demolished, like, most probably have a septic system, like, and there is a tank somewhere for 1,000 gallons, which can be
Another good
dangerous.
point.
So that need to be found, crushed and filled, or removed of any kind, because it's a danger.
So that's another point to consider. Yeah, good thought. Any thoughts specific to what they need to do to kind of reclaim the area back to a natural state?
I'm not landscape architect or anything like that, but it just occurs to me that, once you take the house away, so obviously the house is like, there was a house there, there's nothing natural, that was there. Just sprinkling chips might not really inspire vegetation quickly, so, you know, maybe you throw in some seeds or something to kind of boost up the natural vegetation growth as opposed to just throwing down wood chips. I don't really know what you would do. I don't think we need to put trees or plantings or anything like that, but something to encourage natural growth more than just a bunch of wood chips would be my suggestion, because you want it to regrow quickly.
Yep, we understand that,
Yeah,
and I think we
that's,
can.
I had sort of I originally sort of thought the chips would be enough, but I was kind of rethinking the same thing. I don't know if seeds are the right thing, but
I'm not
even
sure.
some small, like, I wouldn't think you need to plant like landscape quality, large caliper trees, but you could probably pretty cost effectively put some, you know, really small.
Plugs or something.
Yeah, exactly, something that, you know, so you're not starting from zero. I think that would probably be more appropriate than just mix the, who knows what's gonna end up there. You probably want it to look relatively similar to the surroundings.
I quite frankly would think it would over time, and I don't think it would take too much. I mean, as we noticed out there, there's a lot of understory type growth on the site, and I imagine that area has a fairly healthy seed stock of, you know, from all the surrounding, you know, vegetation. I don't think that would be a terrible burden to plant trees, but to maintain them can be problematic. This is on the side of a fairly steep hill. There's really not a wet area there where the trees would, you know, be able to grab a lot of water. So if we go through a dry summer or something like that and we plant in the spring, there's a good chance that a lot of those trees won't make it. So for me, I think I'd see a better option of just letting the natural vegetation and the natural seed bank that's in the ground in that area kind of take over, because if we start bringing in, you know, white pine that's maybe not native to that area or something else that's not, it may not do so well. But we'll bring it up and we'll discuss it and we'll come up with an option or to present to you again. I don't think we'll have a solution for you tonight.
That's why, I don't think we would be asking for maintenance and things like that. I think it's more along the lines of getting a head start.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I'll let Tamara.
I guess what occurs to me as I hear this conversation is just thinking about just encouraging growth. And so, you know, not going the direction of the plugs, definitely hearing you in regards to the natural and definitely the seed stock that exists, but erosion control mix, no nutrients, and it has to break down for quite a while before it's really going to encourage growth. And so it feels like some kind of soil or what, you know, like depending on what's there after you demolish the house, just having wood chips is not gonna really encourage growth. So,
Sumok will take over.
One thing we could do is, you know, we could just go, it's Dustin Romo, Sebago Realty. You know, we could just spade out some of the native smaller species that are just around that area. So you've got the understory that's kind of coming in that may be in the fringe areas. And I think that's a good way to kind of maintain the natural species that are out there. Kind of like you say, give it a jump start, get some roots going in that area. So I think once we demo that foundation, pull everything out, we can kind of prep the soil, scarify it, and then dig some areas in there, and we'll just transplant some of the smaller trees around there so that we know that they'll take if they're of a smaller size. And then certainly like the septic tank, generally with those, we pump them out and, you know, fill them with sand and crush them if need be. But so we'll properly dispose of all that when we demo the house.
Okay,
sounds great.
sounds like
Thank
a good plan. All right, well, septic. Let's see, what do we need to cover here, if anything? So I think, yeah, so you were asking for a hydrogeological study waiver, and then this comment is speaking to why one would provide more definitive information. So I guess maybe we can consider that waiver now. Tell us why you don't think you need one.
I'm gonna try to illustrate it, but
I think I remember this from the site walk.
so on this plan, I'm showing the lots. The wells are located at the rear of the lot, further away from the subdivision road, and with the septics up front. We did the test pit locations in, more or less, one of the first things we did. We went out to make sure that the soils were viable, and we didn't find any areas that weren't viable in that. Predominantly, the topography of the land is in a more or less north to south, running parallel with the road rather than running perpendicular to the road. So we anticipate the nitrate plumes to kind of follow the road. And with that being the case, with the fact that we have all the septics up front and all the wells in the back, I don't believe that we'll have any issues of nitrates, or any basic contamination of wells directly related to nitrates from septics. In addition to that, typically we try to look at nitrate plumes in terms of where they might leave the property and go across property boundaries and onto other people's lots. Again, in this case, with the way the lots are laid out and the topography of the land, we don't anticipate any of that scenario. Typically, in soils of this nature, we're expecting the plumes to be 150 to 200 feet in length. And so again, they're not 1,000 feet where they would basically run off the property or into somebody else's well. So for that reason, we don't really think that the hydrogeologic assessment is necessary.
Okay. Yep. I remember your comments along those lines from the site walk. I think we wouldn't necessarily vote on this tonight, or could we? We could at least provide a indication to them.
Those are before you, the waivers are before you.
Yeah, okay.
Should you choose to vote.
Okay. Would, does staff have any concerns about?
Looks like Doug might.
I would respectfully point out for the board's consideration to not look at the hydro study just in relationship to the currently proposed lots, because this backs up to another phase that's higher up. I don't definitively know where those disposal fields are located, but I would submit that it's not as simple because of the subdivision up gradient and the assumed relatively close proximity to bedrock that typically elongates the plumes, if you follow me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I would submit it's not just this, but I don't know if they looked at, I can't see that with my tired eyes, but I don't know if they looked at the location of the disposal fields for what I'll call phase one.
Off-site, yeah.
I mean, I think I commend them for, I took a quick look at it with Kristen, but I think it's good that they've put the wells at the back and concentrated the disposal fields at the front, but I just wonder how it fits in relation to the other project.
Okay, yeah,
Be my
that's a
only-
great point. Care to comment on that
Yeah.
piece of feedback?
No, and I think that's a good point. The layouts of the lots above us, and you could look at this on an aerial, but you'll notice it's sort of the same sort of, more or less general layout of the lot. The lots are fairly close to the road. There's a fairly decent sized tree line before the edge of the property. And you can see the topography here, it more or less mimics the topography of our site. It's just a higher plateau. So I'd assume that wherever their septic systems are, whether they're at the back or the front, we're gonna have plumes running parallel with the road. I don't think they'd be coming down into our site and potentially impacting well locations that we're proposing.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, it's, let me think about this for a second. It's not a, this isn't a public hearing, but, let me at some point,
I was just gonna say the location of the septic systems.
yeah, since you came to show up, I'd be happy to hear you, but I would ask that you go to the podiums, because unfortunately, the people watching on television, if there are actually any, can't hear you from over there.
Mary Ann Rowan, Eagles Nest Road. Just to help him out, on the existing subdivision, all the septic systems are on the front of the lots. The wells are in the back.
Great, thank you. So I think since we're talking about this, the board could consider this waiver at this point.
There are three.
I know there's three. I'm gonna catch them as we get through the memo to the other one, so. Does anyone have any thoughts on whether we should or shouldn't grant the hydrogeological study?
What is the expected depth of the wells?
We haven't investigated that, but I'm guessing 100+ feet. She might actually have a better idea of than I do, quite frankly, but, 100, 150 feet, I think, is not uncommon, but it depends on, bedrock, well, aquifer location, et cetera.
So, thank you.
My only thought was based on the bedrock and how that plays into it. So I feel a little cautious, not quite ready to be able to make a decision on this, even though it seems like a reasonable thing as I sit here. But if there's something about the nature of the rock out there that makes the plumes extend, which sounds like is a possibility, that would be very unfortunate if that were the case and we had the opportunity to do something to mitigate it and we didn't. So that's my only caution, but I have to say I'm a little on the fence about it and I'm willing to be persuaded, so.
Tamara?
Yeah, I'm on the fence. I'm just rereading what we're considering.
So, well, just to be
Yeah.
clear,
It's number
I'm
12.
talking about back to the requested waivers, so it would be a waiver of the hydrogeological study.
That sounds 12, Connor.
Well, it's, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
kind of going a little bit out of order. I'm just,
Right, that's the thing.
since we're already talking about it,
No, that's
I
why
wanted to cover
was-
it now.
I just wanted to remind myself of what I had read. Yeah, what was noted here was just that we should consider the small lot sizes and the associated proximities of wells, septic system, as well as other topography and the potential vernal pools and the wetlands on the site. And there is, just with that, I prefer to err on the side of caution, and not be inclined to want to grant a waiver.
Yeah, that's where I land on this one. I wouldn't really want to grant the waiver. I think if
Is
it's straightforward, you should have an easy time getting it done, and
Is the concern with contamination of wells? Is it with basically, with wells within our own site, wells off-site? I'm curious of what the board's concern would be for the reason to deny the waiver, or not accept the waiver, or not grant the waiver, excuse me.
for me, it's just wanting someone that's an expert in that field confirming that it's okay, because we are not that person.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone else has anything more to add, but
That sums it up
It's-
all.
so, I guess since we're talking about it, if someone wanted to make a motion to grant the waiver, we can vote on it.
The draft language in there just.
Oh, does it include it?
Yeah,
Sorry, I
it may-
kind of went out of
Yeah,
order.
just that it may or may not work for how you want to word it. I had it based on like the ordinance requirements, if you have other language, you might want to amend
Yeah,
it.
I took a different process tonight. Now I kind of worked myself into a, not a corner, but got a little bit out of
Yeah.
order.
I put all the waivers together so you don't
Yeah,
have to
sorry.
repeat the language every single time if you're addressing all three of them. But particularly if you're denying, you'd have to anyway, so.
All right, let's wait on this then. Let's just continue through the discussion points and we'll cover them later. My bad. I thought it was being more efficient and it became less efficient. Okay. Now I gotta get my memo back in order. Okay. Road width. So road width, right of way, monumentation, boundary survey. I guess JP, what I'll ask is, rather than spending time on each of these staff comments, are there any that you want to talk about? Or, like, I don't want to spend time, if you're good with, like, say, we're up to number 7, right? So road width, you're good with that?
Yeah, I have no
So
issue
we'll
with
just
putting it
continue.
on the plan, so.
Okay, so right
We
away?
had, the only thing we kind of pushed back a little bit was on whether or not this was an amended subdivision. So it took us a little bit of time to get that onto our plan, but that's on there now. I have no objection to putting, some dimensioning. The road width is in our details. We have a road section there, but if it's on the subdivision plan, we have the
Yeah.
ability to do it. We can do it.
Okay, so right away was next, and as I remember on this one, if you remember on the plan, they showed a right of way that was created as part of the previous project, and now there's no intent to use that in this project, so, I guess, the feedback of the board, is there any reason that we would ask them to continue to keep it there, or do we not care?
See no reason to keep it.
It wouldn't be so much keeping as it would be adding it to their project.
Wow,
It
yeah,
exists, so
right,
they're
right.
abutting existing.
Yeah,
But it's a question of whether the board would like to see it be a loop road effectively, rather than 2 dead ends. And I know, I don't imagine that there is support for it from the
No.
existing homeowners, and I know it's not part of their proposal, but just making sure you were aware of it.
Yep.
That's why it's raised.
so I think we're aware, and I don't think anyone would be looking for that. Okay, monumentation, this is another waiver request, I guess this one seems to come up a lot, I don't really understand why. I feel like, why not just put the monuments in the corners?
Well, if you've ever installed one, you would know why.
I haven't,
You're
so
talking, you're
fair
talking
point.
about, you're talking about digging a 4 to 6 foot hole in the ground. It's a lot of manual labor. It's an expense. Surveyors are charging, essentially $500 to $600 to do that. It's the cost of the bound, whether it's concrete or granite, is expensive. They're difficult to find in the woods. When they're ornamental, it makes sense. When we leave them above grade, sticking out of the ground and sort of, demarcating like an estate area or something like that, it makes sense. But in this case, what we are doing, we've revised our plan from the initial submittal to show bounds at essentially the end of the road, the points of curvature along the road, and the intersection of the road, with pins representing at each property corner. So the bounds for the road don't necessarily line up with the property corners. So if you're asking for granite monuments or concrete bounds everywhere through the subdivision, we're going to have a lot of them. And it makes it difficult in the future to determine where they are, if lawn grows over them. You know, it's much easier to locate an iron pin with a magnetic locator than it is to find a bound. And yeah, that's the reason. I mean, for survey, for future use, for basically to identify property corners, it's much better to have pins.
Yeah, okay. No, that's good points. It's been typically in the context of the stone walls that we grant the waivers. I think the challenge is so the monumentation is in the ordinance, and I don't know, and Doug probably knows why and where that came from, but, you know, you bring up a lot of good points that just makes me wonder whether that should be updated, which is a whole different topic and forum. It's not our place to.
I mean, my understanding is that the pins are easier to move, that they might find
By-
themselves a new location.
Yeah,
Because
by
those are so
someone.
hard to put in, and they're a big deal to put in.
Yeah,
They say put and properly marked property lines, so that's why it's in the ordinance. Whereas the pins, because they're easier to put in, they're easier to move.
Yeah, but with GPS nowadays, like you can record the position of the pin,
yeah, so,
so
I mean, we're not gonna,
it can be pretty accurate.
yeah. This is the wrong forum to debate this, so we're not gonna get into that, but, you make, you know, good points, and so does Kristen about why it's in there, so.
Yeah,
I guess fortunately or unfortunately, we're starting with what the ordinance says.
Certainly.
And then, you know, we often grant the waiver for things that, you know, clearly make sense, like there's already a stone wall there or whatnot. That's kind of been the typical history.
Yeah, and then this was flagged for you, just if I could, 'cause initially there was no monumentation on the plan when we started writing this memo, and we did work through doing kind of this compromise that you see before
Yep.
you now with the current plan, which has some pins, some monuments, stone wall. It's kind of a mix. So the waiver that's before you tonight for this is a compromise. It's not a
Partial
total
waiver, okay.
It's partial.
Yep,
Just to
we
be
thought
clear.
that it'd be nice to differentiate basically the right-of-way versus property line
Mhm.
too.
Okay.
So, that, you know, if every bound, for instance, right here, you know, we'll have a bound at the property corner and roughly 20 feet away, you'll have another one. It leads itself into some interpretation of what is real, you know, just by property owners themselves, not necessarily the professional and surveyors or engineers. But we will do what you guys tell us to do.
okay. And then, so the staff it sounds like that you're supportive of the partial waiver. That's what you've been working towards. Is that
Yeah.
true? Okay. Okay, we'll come back to that when we do our voting then. Boundary survey. So that's required. No questions there?
No, we've provided a boundary survey for our portion of the property. And this is a sign stamp standard boundary survey. I think there's a little question in my mind is, are we looking for a boundary survey for the entire project site? And if so, we would basically defer back to the plan that was recorded with that original subdivision and just provide that to you as well. So I don't think we have an issue with satisfying that, and that's something we can further discuss with Kristen and staff.
Okay,
But I think we've satisfied that at this point.
all right. Streetlight, we had some discussion on that at the site walk, and it sounds like there's probably support for granting that one, so I don't think there's anything additional we need to cover at this point. We talked about 12, 13. Staff is in agreement. Any questions from the board or concerns on 13? And then last one is the turnaround. Sure,
question
yeah.
about 14. Is it big enough for ladder truck to turn around?
Is it for a emergency services ladder truck? The hammerhead meets the ordinance. I don't know the dimensions and the turning radius of the town's fire apparatus, but I presume it does.
So then, I mean, the question for us then is if you read the second part, they're using the hammerhead as frontage. And I'm trying to think if this is, I can't remember whether this has come up before.
They can use the hammerhead
Yeah.
as frontage. The question here was more of whether or not that needs to be done here, and I think, JP, you can probably speak to that. You did address this, I think, one time when you came in.
Sure.
It just jumped out at me when I was reviewing the plan, like,
Yeah.
why is it on this one person's lot and not part of the road right away? Why is it not part of the road? It's on the lot as an easement.
Yeah.
Instead, it was a different approach.
Yeah, so within your ordinance, the language for the hammerhead is that essentially they're there to be at the end of the road. And so in the event that this road would be extended, they're typically, you guys prefer to see them in an easement. And essentially if it's extended, it's extinguished and the land goes back. In this situation, we're not utilizing it to get to our frontage requirement. This lot is no different than any other lots. It would measure from the easement limit to the other property corner, exceeding the frontage. It's just the way we laid this one out. We don't think this road's gonna be extended. So I think it's more of a permanent fixture here, but at the same time, it's still within an easement, so if it were to be extended, that lot line would remain, and the hammerhead would then become more of Lot 7's property. But do you have a preference as to whether or not it remains one way or the other?
No, I mean, the other thing too is when you think about how the homes are gonna be kind of positioned along the roadway down through there, when that hammerhead leg becomes part of the right-of-way, we generally assign a front yard setback to it, and what it does is the lots that are adjacent to that end up getting pushed further back, and they sometimes have some more unique building envelopes that are kind of unnecessary. So in this case, with it being in an easement, it allows us to kind of line the homes up so that they're, present themselves to the road more uniformly and not just pushing two of them back because the hammerhead just happens to be there.
Makes sense to me. Any concerns or comments? How about the snow storage comment? You have any concerns around that?
You caught me off guard. I wasn't prepared. I didn't recognize that, but I don't think we have any concerns with snow storage. We have pretty well armored drainage swales out here. Essentially, the drainage swales are all riprap. There's a couple of small sections at the crest of the high point of the road that wouldn't have that. The hammerhead area, pushing it beyond it and up into that is an option. I really don't foresee snow storage as being a particular issue with this subdivision. The road is designed to the rural public easements street standard, so future town maintenance is a possibility. But again, I don't think they'll have an issue finding a location for it. But we can work with staff again on that as well.
Okay, all right. Sounds good. So let's move to public hearing. So this is an opportunity for the public to comment on the proposal. If anyone wishes to do so, is there anyone that has any public comment?
Mary Marion Road, Eagles Nest Road. Just to make it perfectly clear, we already have a well-established HOA, so they would have their own HOA, correct?
Yes.
Two separate
Yep.
entities.
Wouldn't have anything to do with yours.
Just, I want to make sure that's.
Yep.
And, that's my only concern.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
My name's Tom Rowan, I'm at 39 Eagles Nest Road. My question pertains to the comment on the right-of-way as it existed on our phase, if you will. If I understand what you said, you're just gonna leave it recorded. You're not taking it away, it doesn't get removed or changed in any way. You're just kind of like letting it exist the way it always has.
I think that's the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if you, I thought the other option would be to have it removed from our deed or added on to their deed. Was that what I understood?
They don't own your property, they don't own the property on which the right-of-way is shown at this time,
We do, right.
so they can't alter that. What we were asking the board is if they wanted to have them show a connection to connect to your right-of-way
Okay,
in the future, and that they've said no to that.
okay, all right, good,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you, good question. I think there's nobody else, so I'll close public comment and move to some discussion points, many of which we've kind of covered, so I'm hoping we can move through these quickly at this point. So first up is open space. Does the board endorse staff position that the common park cannot be located in any portion of the perimeter buffer and must be readily accessed from the subdivision road? That's a yes. So we can move past that, we've talked about that. Does the board support the proposed trails and associated right-of-ways as shown per open space committee input? It sounded like at the site walk there was support for that, so I think that's all yeses. Not seeing any no's. Right-of-way, does the board want to require the plan to show a potential location of right-of-way for connection of Eagles Nest Road to Erie Drive? So this is a no, we already talked about that. Does the board find the phosphorus management plan not applicable to this project? I think we agreed that it's not applicable. Okay, so that is a yes, it is not applicable. Waivers, does the board support the waiver for the monumentation in whole or in part? So I think I'd be behind the partial waiver,
Same.
personally.
Yep.
Jenya?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll get to that when we vote. Does the board support the waiver for the dead-end street light? As of the site walk, that was a yes from everyone. Anybody
Yes.
change their position there? That's a yes. And support a waiver for the hydrogeological study?
No.
So that's no's, okay. So keep all that in mind when we get to our voting. Lot shape, does the board find the shape of lots 1 and 8 acceptable per the ordinance? So,
Feels like
go
more
back.
work was gonna happen
yeah,
on
that
lot
one,
one.
that
An
one,
issue.
Yeah,
that one, right,
Yeah,
that
that
one
one's gonna
is,
change.
that one's TBD.
yeah. And one might, depending on conversation with you all.
Old building, so they've already said they're going to remove it. As far as plantings, they've already said their plan is to replant some native plants. So those are already determined. C, roadway easement for lot 7. Is that the hammer? That's the hammerhead that you're referring to, right? So,
Didn't seem like an issue for you guys.
yep, so we're all set with that. And then, I assume I agree with all the consulting engineers' comments. I think that would be true of everyone. Okay, so let's keep moving on. So we have 3 waivers that someone could propose to grant, if they so wish. And it sounds like what the plan would be is that whoever makes the motion would, I guess we don't want to tie all 3 of these together, because that's going to be a mess. So, but we do need to, well, I guess you could do it 2 ways. I mean, if there was no motion, it basically fails because there's no motion. But whoever makes the motion on the other ones, just please don't read the first one. And then I think we're gonna grant the other 2 as drafted.
I just have a quick clarifying
Sure,
question.
yeah.
The third bullet here of the waivers, this reflects the partial waiver that the staff has approved, right? It's not,
That we've reviewed, yeah, the
Yep.
minimum of inclusion and no fewer than 4 granite ones,
okay,
parent corners with
Okay.
stone wall, et cetera, and then
Gotcha.
rebar for the rest,
Okay.
yeah,
all right.
yes.
Anybody want to make a waiver? A waiver motion,
Aye.
sorry.
I move to approve the following waivers for the request by Sebago Realty LLC, represented by DH Roma Consulting Engineers, for a proposal to create a 14-lot residential open space subdivision on the 41 plus or minus acre parcel off Eagles Nest Road at tax map 63, lot 35-24, on the remaining land in the Eagles Ridge subdivision in a rural residential and agricultural zoning district. The proposal is subject to major subdivision plan review. The waivers are the 401.13.15C.4 requirement for a dead-end streetlight due to unwanted overnight lighting for lot owners at the end of the road, and the 401.13.1D requirement for stone concrete monuments at all corners due to the existence of stone walls on the site. The town will require a minimum of inclusion of no fewer than 4 granite stone stone property markers on each side of the roadway, and all parent parcel corners that are not marked by stone wall that will be retained should be marked with rebar, iron, or stone, with the requirement that the updated plan must show the existing noted as to be retained stone walls on site. Metal pins will be installed at the other points of curvature / property lines per the ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? No discussion. All in favor? That's 4-0. So we have the 2 waivers, and we should consider the other request for 401.7.4 for waiver of the hydrogeological study. Is there anyone that wishes to make a motion to grant that waiver?
I will. Move
You
to,
don't have to.
could we just leave it? And it'll die?
Yeah.
No, I
mean,
don't want
you
to.
can, I mean, you
No.
can, and we'll vote
Nope,
against it.
If
or
you'd like, we can just withdraw that waiver request, if that's
Okay.
easier.
Either way. Yeah, okay.
We'll voluntarily
That
withdraw.
that works as well. So the waiver request is withdrawn, so there's no need to go through the motions. Thank you, we appreciate that.
You saw how painful this is.
Okay, next up is completeness. So I think, oh, well, let's see, I was previously going to suggest that it was not complete. Well, it isn't
It's not,
complete,
it's
yeah,
not.
because they withdrew it, yeah, so.
And you granted all the waivers.
Correct. So I think on that one, we'll deem it complete once you have your hydrogeological study, and then preliminary approval would also wait until then.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I mean, this is gonna come as well, but the shapes of lots 1 and 82 are open questions.
Right,
So there's another reason for it not to be preliminary.
preliminary, correct. Yep,
And the open space,
and the open space,
no final location delineated.
right.
Common ends.
Yep, so I think at this point, we can table this until they're back next time. If someone wants to make a motion to table it, unless you guys have anything else?
No, not at this time.
Okay,
Not at this time.
all right, so if someone wants to table it until they're back with more information?
I move to table the Area Estates Amendment to Eagles Ridge Subdivision Preliminary Plan Review till they come back.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's 4-0, so we'll see you when we see you. All right, one more, all right. Continued business. Campbell Acres Subdivision Amendment, Final Plan Review. This is a request by McDonald Brothers Custom Builders LLC, represented by DM Roma Consulting Engineers, for Planning Board Final Plan Review of a proposal to create 3 lots in the Campbell Acres subdivision on the 7.12 plus or minus parcel off Jenny Drive, map 56, lot 17-28-03 in the Rural Residential and Agricultural Zoning District. This proposal is subject to major subdivision review. We have an applicant.
Yes, and I'm really not that great at multitasking, so just give me a moment, and I want to line up my presentation materials, and I'll get it.
So while you're getting ready, JP is thinking back to emails, and Kristen, you sent a note with an update on the last I remember, they didn't have everything they needed for consideration for final approval. Was that the latest, or?
This one, the consulting engineer still has some questions about stormwater.
Right.
And its ability to meet the ordinance, and at this time, it was not meeting the ordinance 100%. And I
Right.
sent you his latest, I didn't think he would have time, but he did actually weigh in prior to this meeting, and I had forwarded that to you. But he
Okay.
was just finding that it did not meet the ordinance 100%, and I know the applicant's prepared to address that with
Okay.
you this evening.
Okay,
That was the outstanding piece. It is complete, if you will, but perhaps not up to what you're looking for, but maybe it is. We'll see.
All right, thank you for your patience with me. My name is JP Conley. I work for DM Roma Consulting Engineers, and I'm here representing the McDonald Brothers Custom Builders. So I don't think this project's been in front of you a couple times. It's located off of Jenny Drive, which is accessed from Campbell Shores Road. It's a 3-lot subdivision proposing 3 individual duplexes for a total of 6 units. Last time we were in front of you, we got a waiver for the high-intensity soil survey. And we went back and forth a little bit with that. And it turns out that we really don't need that waiver. For us to verify the soils as prescribed in the ordinance, it essentially was the same amount of effort to provide the high-intensity soil survey. We got the report and for the high-intensity soil survey on December 4th, and it was provided to the town. And I have a stamp plan which I got today. So the stamp plan is in front of us, and it's up there as well. So the high-intensity soil survey confirms the soils, and as we suspected, they're moderately well-drained across the site. So I think that the only really outstanding issue is with regards to the stormwater design. So when I last left here, I had marching orders to investigate what we could do. We had done some preliminary investigation in terms of whether or not we could achieve the flooding standard and the general standard, which are the two outstanding standards from the DEP Chapter 500 manual that we are not meeting at this point in time. So the clear answer is yes. We've looked at it. We can address the flooding standard. We have a design here that I can show you that would address it. But the issue with it is that the site topography is, as you may or may not remember, fairly steep. And what that does is it doesn't allow us to put a pond further interior on the site and capture the end of the road. So we have a design with a pond that would basically take care of the flooding. And if I can get it zoomed in, I can show you more clearly what that would look like. The green area is our currently proposed tree line. This red area right here is what the tree line would be.
Not showing up
It's not
for
showing
us.
up for us.
Yeah,
Okay.
this one here has got you.
If Brad
You're
can
there.
switch it,
We want that.
switch
I-
it to screen. Doug, can you ask him if he can switch it back, out back? To the screen in front of, full screen, yeah, for the board.
That's all we can do.
That's okay.
But
Yeah,
That should be
Can
fine.
it
well,
be
that's
on
the,
the- Still
that's the
better.
Zoom meeting, unfortunately.
The one that's recording, the one that's on TV, can he switch that too? The Zoom meeting that's recording, can you have that? There we
Oh,
go.
yay,
Alright.
that's it.
There we go.
All right,
We're rocking now.
you're
Small
back on.
successes. So this plan right here in front of you illustrates what the tree line is proposed. It is green. And you'll see at the, to the top of the road, at the extent of our at the property interface with Jenny Drive, we are showing additional grading and then a red tree line. So that pond right there would address the flooding concern. The problem with that, and it's sort of come to light, is that the ordinance doesn't allow any intrusion into the 75-foot buffer with the exception of the road. So in light of that, if we were to move that pond further up the hill, we would be missing portion of that watershed from the road. And we would not achieve, it'd be very difficult for us to achieve. So I've been apprenticed to Jedi ship, I think. I'm not sure which one to point to. I guess I'll do this one. So
Just don't point it at us.
yeah, or any planes. So this is basically the area of the pond that I would need to achieve the minimal decrease so that at this study point right here where water comes off the property, right here, in the drainage swale associated with the road, that water would be less than it is today. At this location, we're significantly reducing the discharge onto the neighbor's site. And then I'm gonna have to adjust the plan here to scroll down. And at this point, study point 1, the town has a culvert that runs at the intersection of Jenny Drive and Franz Circle. And again, in all storm events that we've modeled, there's a reduction at that one, albeit that the 25-year design is essentially only 100th less than the pre-developed condition. There is a reduction. So that culvert should function as it does today, indifferently whether this design is here or not. So what we did to achieve that was we've oversized this basin. This basin is bigger than its filter area bottom needs to be, and it holds it was designed to just basically make sure that I'm not flooding at that location. And I've provided a table that shows the reductions. So at this table, let me zoom in a little bit better so you guys can see. So while I can't quite see study point 2 is at the road. But at study point 1, as proposed, without the second pond, I have a reduction of 1.4 CFS in the 2-year event, about a 1 CFS reduction in the 10-year event, and I'm matching in the 25-year event at study point 1, which is the road culvert. At study point 3, which is the Foster's property and the drainage swale at the top of the plateau, at the property line, I'm reducing that one even more significantly. We're going from 2.86 CFS in the 2-year event to less than 1. It's 0.9 CFS in the 2-year event. And after that pond goes in, a reduction from 6.02 to 4.57, and then a reduction of 9.91 to 8.08, so nearly 2 CFS in the 25-year event going onto the Foster's property. With the ponds, the second ponds, the table below, it's better. If we do reduce the peak discharge in the post-developed condition to all storm events, but the problem with it is we're destroying the buffer. So in light of that, we're going to ask for a waiver from that requirement, from strict compliance to it. The other concern with this design is that while this is a detention basin, it will provide attenuation for flooding. For me to get a filter basin to provide the stormwater quality treatment at the end of the road, I need to bring that up just based on the design of the basin to provide about another 2.5 feet of vertical change so that I can outlet a pipe from it. So that would set that basin more or less about at station 80 or 90 on this plan. I did look at putting a pond in that location. I can address theoretically can address the stormwater quality concern. I still would have a minor increase in what gets to the drainage swale. So I'm going to draw your attention back to the table that I presented, the table 1 there. Again, study point 2 is what we're having for increases at the road. So in the 2-year event, the road swale will see 1.07 CFS as modeled in the existing condition. And in the proposed condition, it goes to 1.48 CFS. In the 10-year event, it's 2.43 in the pre-developed condition and 3.27 in the developed condition. In the 25-year event, we're going from 3.61 CFS to 4.62 or 4.82 CFS, so 1.2 CFS increase. While the percentage of the increase is fairly significant, the flows are very minimal. The drainage swale, as in the areas that I took survey shots, it's about 1.5 feet to 2 feet in depth. So that drainage swale should be able to handle, depending on the road slope, and it does vary, more than 15 CFS. I'm figuring it has a capacity of about 18 to 20. So this drainage swale, as you guys may have noticed when we were out on the site, it was freshly created. It was rehabbed and redone by DPW at a certain point, and it's fairly significant. We don't see any issue with that swale surcharging or not having the capacity to convey these flows. But again, it doesn't meet, we're not reducing that flow at the property line. We can do it with the pond, but the pond not only would potentially, I don't think we can impact the scenic buffer, so we'd have to pull it up 75 feet, which is more or less in the same location where the existing pond is. So we're gonna have a pond on the other side of the street that would basically be in the same location, maybe a little further down, and I'm still missing a fair amount of that road. It's just the nature of the road, and the topography out there. If the site dropped off and went down, and then came back up, it would be fine, because I'd have a low point internal of the site, but my low point is the road. So water runs downhill, I can't capture it and bring it onto a pond. My concern would be that if I were to build a pond in either of these locations, whether it's in the scenic buffer and I get full compliance, or I pull it up the hill and potentially get full compliance, I'm going to eliminate the buffer that we've really tried hard to maintain out here. Before we even got to the site walk, we heard concerns about creating buffer and distancing from the neighbors and not disturbing tree lines as best as possible. So I think I've achieved that. Eliminating that tree line in this area, pulling the pond in, whether it's down at the end of the road or not, we're going to be essentially intruding on the neighbor's view of this right now. We have a very limited opening for the road and the tree line. That distance versus that distance. And whether I put the pond at the end of the road or pull it up, as you know, you can see through 50 feet of trees without problems. Right now, we have a fairly substantial buffer that would essentially eliminate any view from Jenny Drive, except for that, small little stretch up the hill to see the existing structures. One last point on that one. Let me see if I can.
May I ask you a clarifying question?
Sure.
So everything you've just presented us here, like the engineer had not seen that? Or he
Yes,
did see?
he's reviewed it, yep.
He's
That's
reviewed
because-
everything.
Yeah, so, because he was still feeling like you were not meeting.
But we're not meeting those standards. We're
Okay.
5%.
I just wanted to.
Generally
make sure that
5%
that
short
was-
on the quality standards.
Yeah.
We have a reduced treatment factor on this one because we're not developing a lot of this lot, so we need to, we're required to retreat 90% of the impervious area, and I believe 75% of the developed area. We're providing treatment for 84%,
Yeah.
and then 69%, so
Right.
roughly 5% is what we're missing. But, sorry.
So you have other levers you could pull.
Right.
You could make less impervious area.
Well, we'd still not be able to capture the end of the road.
You could use pervious pavement,
Um,
treatment
I
on
s-
the road.
Well, I don't believe that would give us full treatment, though. I mean, it's still considered an impervious area.
Busiest road in Maine is pervious pavement with excellent treatment.
Well, but
Right in front of
you
the main-
still.
Hang on, hold on, one person at a time talk.
Sorry.
I'll let Tamara finish.
It just, busiest road in Maine, the main mall, like right in front of the main mall is pervious pavement with treatment underneath. And it was tested really well and definitely provided full treatment.
It's also flat. So
It is flat.
we approach 12% on this road, so that makes it
Still-
difficult. Water's gonna shed right off of it. It's not gonna go down. Now, the last thing I can say to this is that this is the subdivision plan that was approved in 2022. This plan, if the project's denied, this plan allows for a development of a single-family home or duplex with a long driveway, putting it wherever it wants. You would lose all stormwater controls. We would have no stormwater management that was not required. The buffering is not required. We could clear the entire lot except for the buffer in this area. And in a situation where we have, the buildable area up in this area, you're going to have a long driveway that's just gonna go right down to Jenny Drive. And you're going to see a substantial increase at the bottom of the hill. you'll see a substantial increase in flows at that culvert, and the Fosters will also see a substantial increase as well as no buffer, or very limited buffer. So, we're faced with the dilemma of you know, obliterating a buffer that we really tried really hard to achieve, or asking for a minor, or a waiver from a minor increase in flow and a minor decrease in the amount of stormwater quality management the treatment we need. So I do want you to consider that.
Okay, thanks. Before we talk about that, Jen, you wanted to make a comment?
Just about the permeable pavement. There, I've been working in South Portland, and it was done when I was working there. Everything runs into the special basins where the tree is supposed to be growing, okay? And they will be vaporizing that water, original idea. We had, one of the pump station had the same type of pavement, and we had a retention pond to treat it before it will go into the stream. So whatever you do, like, you need to treat it. You have to collect it somewhere and treat it.
Yep. Thanks.
To that point,
yeah.
gravel is considered a impervious surface and needs treatment as well. So,
All right, so what are you looking from us tonight?
well,
We still have
preliminary
a lot.
approval on the last one,
ways.
final approval on this one. We need direction, quite frankly. So the option we have in front of us is, we request either one or two waivers, and one waiver we don't think we are actually able to be granted because based on language that's come up in the past couple of weeks, we don't think you guys can allow any disturbance when that's a 75-foot scenic buffer.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna get any traction on that one.
No, and
So,
we
what
don't
do we-
expect to. So
Right.
the other option is basically waive the request, or we install another pond, essentially at the same location as the other one on the other side of the street. Minimal increase in the amount of the road that we're able to treat with the design and the technical nature of that basin. And it's not a matter of size or anything, it's just a matter of elevation. So, this is a tricky situation. We've scratched our heads over this one a lot. Our budget will show that. And I honestly really don't have a solid solution for you, other than, looking at whether or not the increase in Jenny Drive's stormwater is a big concern for you, or if it's a minimal concern for you. So it is a crux. I don't like putting you guys in this position, but I don't really have too many alternatives that I think you'd be satisfied with.
Well, we don't like being in this position because, as you very clearly mentioned, the buffering was a big deal to all the neighbors that came out, and we worked hard to maintain that. So we don't want to be going there, I don't think.
This plan may actually further clarify what would be required in terms of tree clearing. So it's the same tree line that I showed on the other plan. This was just on the plan and profile rather than the stormwater plan.
I'm not following.
So the red again is would be the tree clearing limits that we would need. If we were to take that pond and shift it up the road, it's gonna relatively stay the same shape and size.
I'm reading that like that's in the buffer.
It is. That's the plan that I was showing you previously with it, so.
Well, that's a hard
So if I were to take that area.
Oh, you're just saying it would be
And
that big,
yeah.
and slide it up, okay.
So essentially, the filter basin is about 2.5 feet, of thickness from the bottom of the pond to the bottom of where it outlets. So I need to have a pipe that runs basically 2.5 feet higher than the existing outlet as it is, or the existing swale and I need cover over that pipe. So I need to make sure it doesn't freeze and doesn't get ruined when trucks drive over it, et cetera. So the potential ability for us to capture that additional water and additional treatment is very limited just because of the nature of the device. And it's really the best option we have. But again, doing that and moving that up the hill is basically going to give you your 70-foot scenic buffer, but no other trees between that buffer and the first building.
Go ahead.
The pervious pavement option, appreciating that it's not going to be the end-all be-all, and then I'm sure you thought about that, but would it get you closer to treating more of the water, or because of the grade, it wouldn't even do anything?
It has nothing to do with the grade or the nature of the, it's still it's still considered an impervious surface, and I still need to provide treatment for it. The idea is that what we would need here is no pavement for the last 60 feet of the road, or the 60 feet of the road, and essentially just lawn.
Oh.
That's the only way we really could achieve the impervious treatment calculation, just because we can't capture the last 60, 75, 80 feet of the road.
I see.
I will also say, we, while it doesn't require it, we are providing a huge culvert at the end of the road per the DPW request. Right now, that pipe hydraulically doesn't see a lot of water, but we're still providing an 18-inch culvert there. I think there's some value in that. We understand where the town engineers or town peer review engineers' comments are coming from, and his concern is just on the precedence that's been in this neighborhood. There's been some culvert failures associated with road failures. In this scenario, we are at the high point of the road, so fortunately, the watershed for this culvert is really small in terms of the fact that that's the high point of the road. All the water, that side of it goes that way. Inside that line goes that way, so it's not, the road swales and curbs and road design generally can achieve a way better capacity than we're gonna ever touch with this, what's getting into it, so.
I don't know where to go with this one. I mean,
Well, I mean,
The-
I don't wanna, I don't mean to talk over you, but.
yeah, go ahead.
I get the sense that regardless of whether I could convince you that I'm right or wrong, I don't think we'd get the vote this evening.
Yeah, you're not gonna
So-
get to a vote this evening for sure. I guess I'm trying to get you some direction, which
Yeah.
in my mind, yeah, I don't, it's a tough one for us sitting here. At a
we-
minimum, to me, some professional engineer that's not you, or, you know, your firm or associated with the applicant is gonna need to make some type of statement that this is not creating a problem.
Yeah.
Like,
So-
you know, there's no way we're gonna do anything without a minimum of that,
We understand that.
which is different than, especially where you're trying to ask for something about an exception to the ordinance.
Certainly understand.
So that's like the minimum. Go ahead.
And I guess the other piece, and that there are no other alternatives. I really want to understand that there are no other alternatives.
Okay.
It's-
Well, yeah, I mean, we know one alternative,
Well,
which
is to
is,
make less
is
impervious
to,
surface.
well, no, I was gonna, actually, what I was gonna say was the, you know, the additional pond and all the clearing that goes with it, which
Well,
is
yeah,
not really the objective we're after, I don't think, just to get that last few percent.
So, I've been thinking this through for several sleepless nights, to be honest with you. I think what I need to do is essentially garnered support from the town peer review engineer. I can sense the insecurity and the apprehension of doing anything from the board at this point in time. Would support from Will Haskell, the town's peer review engineer, be a method towards satisfying or your concerns and potentially granting that waiver?
I've been talking first a lot, so I'm gonna try and not do it all the time. So if anyone else would like to, go ahead.
I think, from my perspective, Mr. Chairman, the main thing, we had all the neighbors, all of them came, and they had a lot of concerns about this development, and some of them did have some concerns about stormwater, and at the time, we were like, they have to meet stormwater, like, that's the requirement. Given this layout of the land, I understand the challenge that you have, but at the end of the day, we cannot be creating a problem here with this development. And your statement earlier, like, well, if you just put one structure here, then you wouldn't have to do any mitigation. Well, yeah, but that's not what you want to do. You want to put 3 duplexes here. So we need to hear from an expert. I think the chairman said it very well, that there isn't going to be a problem. Like, there's the requirement, it's there for a reason. And if there's aspects of this property that mean that ultimately, because you made the culvert bigger and you did it new, that at the end of the day, there isn't going to be a problem. I don't think we can count on there being less flood situations, probably more. And so taking shortcuts and even if it is only 10%, that makes me very nervous in this space. I'm open to being assured by an expert that is working for the town and on the town and all of those neighbors' behalves. I don't know, that's my thought there.
Yep,
I
thanks.
appreciate that.
You can always hide this water under the road.
That's pervious
And then pump it out and put an aeration system inside. You will meet everything you want, but that's prohibitively expensive.
So I was gonna just add one thing, after all these meetings that we've had on this project, we go back to the office and we all just kind of put our heads together and we try to think, what are the issues here at hand and kind of what's creating this problem that we're trying to solve. And the reality of the situation is that the reason we're having issues on this project is actually because the project is so small. I know we've been looking at it in that we're proposing 3 lots and 3 duplexes on a lot that, was originally laid out as a single lot. But when you look at how the treatment standards are worded, like everything is on a percentage basis. So trying to treat 95% of a relatively small project means there's very little area that you cannot treat and meet those standards. So if this was area estates and we've got 1,000 feet of road and 14 house lots, there's always gonna be a little tiny area of road. Usually it's right up next to the road you're connecting to. And that's why they wrote the standards to be 95% and not 100%, is because they recognize there's certain areas where you're just not gonna be able to get it all. So what happens is that when you take a project that's only, on a couple of acres and a few hundred feet of road, you have that same little length of road that you just can't treat. But the problem is it makes up a bigger percentage of the overall project. So the reality is from a square footage basis, this project might have the same amount of square feet of pavement that's being untreated that leaves the site as a 50-lot subdivision, but because it's so small, it represents 15% of the impervious area instead of 2% of a big project. So, and that's the same reason why we've got an increase in one location, is because what we've done, because there's been so much concern about drainage, is we've added these little intermediate study points all along the way so we can analyze what happens when the water leaves this culvert, and then what happens when it goes into this culvert, and then what happens when it eventually gets down to the end. So anytime you do an analysis and you put a bunch of little points along the way, it's gonna be an up and down situation where you're gonna have some, you know, increases in one little area, but then you're gonna have decreases in another area, and when they kind of meet, that's when you have overall decreases, and those are the things that we look at. And the increase in the area that we're having trouble with, again, it's kind of an instantaneous point, like right when the water leaves the site, right at the end of the driveway, we have a short little segment of ditch that's gonna receive a little bit of extra flow, but then where it joins the flow from the rest of the site, we've mitigated it and we're back to decreases. So that's the situation we're in, is because there was so much concern about this site, and we had a room full of people and stuff, but we kind of went to that level of analysis. And those are the struggles that we've been up against. So, you know, we don't like asking for waivers, and we're really kind of at a point here with this project where, like JP had said, it's like, you know, anything that we're doing seems to be going backwards. We're cutting more areas, we're really not solving the problem, and it's just because the project is so small compared to what, I mean, those stormwater laws that the DEP wrote were never intended to be for projects that were under an acre in size. I mean, that's their rules, is they said, let's make these standards for projects that exceed an acre of impervious area or 20,000 square feet in a lake watershed. So they're meant for these bigger projects where you can meet these standards. When you take those same standards and you apply it to a very small project, it's hard to meet those areas. So just wanted to put it in a little bit different context, and that's why we're struggling with these things. I think we can have that conversation with Goral Palmer. Hopefully we can all kind of get to that same place. But that's just kind of how we got here, and we'll see what we can do.
Yep, thank you for adding that. So I think that's the next step for you guys, to have that conversation with Goral Palmer.
Yep, we look forward to that.
So I think we've done all we can on that topic
Yep.
tonight.
As far as everything else goes, I don't have any concerns or issues. I think we can address, and I think we have addressed all the other concerns that are outstanding. The last piece of it was the high-intensity soil survey, which we had finalized today. So it's just
So,
really
okay,
down to the
so
stormwater.
that's good. So you're gonna spare me going through the comments from town staff?
We have them, we can address them clearly, and when we come back to you, hopefully with support from staff and the peer review engineer.
I would just mention, the only other thing that hasn't been discussed is the buffering to the
Yeah,
front.
well, that's what I was getting to. Yep, so we got through soils, so buffering, so a comment from town staff was, I think that you showed, particularly to the Foster's property, you showed it as clearing limit rather than no cut, which I thought we talked about it more in terms of no cut.
He's added 6 evergreens. I'm looking at comment number 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question is, are we okay with that?
Which plan?
I would look at
Just evergreen.
the amended subdivision or the plan and profile. Either one of them shows the tree line. I have up, and I've kind of zoomed in on that area. And to that effect, we've added some notes as well as an area to be planted within. So that,
Oh, gotcha.
that note where I'm pointing to the tree line says no additional clearing beyond proposed tree line. And there's further discussion in detail in the general notes on that.
Mm-hmm.
Where this is a forested area, if it's cleared, it's fairly easy to just plop down symbols for trees and just kind of lay them out. But where I'm proposing to plant and supplement a forested area, it really wouldn't behoove me to say, put it here, unless I know where all the trees are, all the root systems are. So what I'm saying is, I'm delineating an area, and that's shown in this dash line, that, let me So I'm showing an area in this area, this location, that will be supplemented with additional conifer evergreen trees, so that it provides a better buffer to them. The tree line is the tree line. We've had that discussion before. Our feeling is that the plan and the notes clearly state that in the town, basically ordinance requires the tree lines to be maintained indefinitely. So where I'm showing the limit of trees is gonna be the limit of clearing, you know, and it can be enforced.
Okay.
And in addition to that, I'd like to plant inside of that to create a more thicker, supplemented buffer. And I've presented this and I've met with the Fosters on 3 different occasions, I believe. I really like them, they've been great, and they're very nice people, and I would like to help them in any way I can. And I think this is the best way to do that. So we're gonna basically say, well, they're out there, they clear the trees, they build the house, and then we find the areas where there's voids and plant the 6 trees there. I mean, I don't mind showing 6 trees along the tree line, if that's what you guys would prefer, but I don't think that provides the value that this would provide.
Sounds good. Kristen, did you have any other things that you felt like we needed to cover tonight?
No, I think that was the piece, the big pieces, the front buffer and the stormwater, so.
Yeah. Okay, hopefully you guys can come up with a good solution with Goral Palmer.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we want to work with you, but at the same time, it's, you know, there was a developer that made a decision to subdivide the lots the way they did, and they left you to work with what they left you with. And that's, you know, not every site can do everything that everyone wishes it could, and someone else's oversight, or whatever you want to call it, that gets left with us is not a great thing either, but we'll do our best to work with you.
Yep, we understand, and I think you've given us great direction, so we know what to do, and I hope that we can come back with town support and town staff and the town peer review engineer, and at that point, potentially get you guys to vote for approve this.
All right. Sounds good. Need anything else from us?
Nope.
Are we tired of each other at this point?
No, not at all. Let's do another sidewalk. Thank you guys for giving us all this time. I really appreciate it. It's been a long night for everybody, and we know what we need to do, and if we're back in front of you, think we've solved it, and if we're not, we haven't.
Okay. All right, so I think we need a motion to table.
I move to table the Campbell Acres subdivision amendment final plan review.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's 4-0. We'll see you when we see you.
Thank you.
All right. How about a motion to
I
adjourn?
move we adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor? All right, we're out of here. 9:50.
Before we all leave, I was just noticing the February meeting is on the first Thursday, for some reason, it seems clear.